The Alberta Premier is continuing her trip through Eastern Canada one day after meeting the Prime Minister. Danielle Smith says she's in Quebec and Ontario this week to build relationships. But Alberta's relationship with BC continues to flare up over pipelines. And with me now in studio is Premier Danielle Smith. Premier, welcome.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I do want to start with your relationship with Prime Minister Mark Carney. We are just over 24 hours after your meeting with him. What did you hear from the Prime Minister, and did it meet your needs in terms of what you wanted to hear from the Prime Minister, especially on energy policy?
Well, we're very hopeful. I mean, I know that the Prime Minister realized he had to pivot when he got elected. He eliminated the carbon tax, the retail carbon tax immediately. He's had a look at the net zero vehicle mandate, and he's paused that and delayed the implementation, I think realizing it's unworkable. So I think he's demonstrated that he's pragmatic, and so we've been making the case about why it is the remaining bad laws need to be addressed if we're going to restore the private sector investment climate to be able to attract big dollars back, so that we can get pipelines built. So we've got a three-part proposal, address those 9 bad laws. Let's build a bitumen pipeline to the BC coast, and let's build the Pathways project to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. And I think that we'd be able to get a deal that works not only for Alberta, but for Canada as well.
So what kind of, I mean, look, a pipeline is a bit more further down the road, but in terms of some of these other issues you're talking about, what's the timeline that we might expect something more firm?
I think they have to all come together. I mean, there has to be a meeting of the minds so that we know that if we have a big, expensive project like Pathways, which could be $10 to $20 billion, that there's a new source of revenue from it, which you would get from a million barrel a day bitumen pipeline that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues, of which governments get about 40%. But in order to be able to fill that pipeline, we need to eliminate the tanker ban off the West Coast. We need to eliminate the emissions cap. We need to eliminate the greenwashing bill that punishes companies for talking about their environmental records. So there's a few things that are preconditions to being able to get anything built, and those are the things that we're talking about.
Okay, I do want to talk about that pipeline proposal where Alberta is now acting as a proponent for a pipeline route to the BC coast. You've said that the Prime Minister needs to show some courage and some leadership. So tell me what that's going to look like in reality, in practice. What do you need to see in terms of a signal right now from the federal government that they might be interested?
Well, what we'd like to see is having it on the major projects list. We know that the initial major projects list that was put out had some projects that were at a pretty advanced stage, but the Prime Minister has signaled that he wants to do an additional list by Grey Cup, and we have 2 projects we'd like to see on it, the bitumen pipeline as well as the Pathways project. And so that's what we're working towards. I think having an announcement like that would demonstrate that the Prime Minister has heard and is concerned about Alberta's interests and willing to address them. And so that's we've got a few weeks to see if he's going to move in that direction, and we hope he does.
Okay, but as you know, of course, the BC coastal tanker ban is a big part of this question of a pipeline. The federal energy minister calls it a hypothetical question right now in terms of removing that ban because there is no official proposal before the federal government. Do you expect that the federal government will go ahead and ultimately revoke that ban?
Well, I can tell you we've got all of the most skilled pipeline companies at the table as our technical advisor. I think between all of the people at the table, I think they've got a collective 550 years of experience in building pipelines. Enbridge, Southbow, which is the former TC Energy oil assets, as well as Trans Mountain, which has some experience in building to the BC coast. So I think people see the opportunity of opening up new markets. And when you think about where the new markets are, for our product, it makes sense to be Asia. With the opening of the Trans Mountain pipeline, we've already seen that half of the product is going to Asia, not just China, but also Korea. They've now committed to buying 1 million barrels a month, and we hear that they want more. So that if we're serious about this exercise of trying to diversify our markets, because we've become too reliant on the U.S., that really is the only option for us and the best option, which is why we've chosen to partner with a technical advisory committee to advance it, start the work with Indigenous consultation so that we can have an Indigenous equity stake and hopefully get a yes from the Prime Minister.
Okay, I do want to ask about the BC element of this because the BC Premier is again criticizing your pipeline plan. He's calling it fictional, he's calling it fantasy, and right now I do want to show you part of what David Eby had to say on social media yesterday.
Doesn't have First Nations consent. Makes no financial or economic sense. It has no private proponent, no route, no private funding, and would cost taxpayers billions. The non-existent Alberta pipeline project would put tens of billions of dollars in real BC projects and jobs at risk.
So we have the BC Premier saying, look, I'm going to stand up and defend my province's economy, my province's job, my province's major projects against the threat that a pipeline poses. And he also talked about the environmental aspect as well. Earlier today, you called those comments un-Canadian and unconstitutional. Why is what he said un-Canadian and unconstitutional?
Well, they're both. I'll say why they're un-Canadian is because we all have agreed at various tables that we're going to support each other, to do more trade with each other and to open new markets together. We agreed at both of our tables to work on an economic corridor between Prince Rupert and Churchill. And it wasn't everything gets to go in here except the products that Alberta produces. It's we're going to support you and you support us. So I think that there's a little bit of grandstanding going on there, and it's unconstitutional because it's not his authority to make these decisions. That's been very clearly defined by the court. The reason why trade and commerce power has been given to the federal government and ports as well and interprovincial pipelines is because we can't allow the parochial interests of a single premier to stop the major projects that need to be developed for the benefit of the country. And so we are also not at all interested in seeing a project of this magnitude built with taxpayer money. I think that would be a failure of what it is we're trying to do. We have lost about, our estimate, $500 billion in private capital because of the bad laws that have been in place for the last 10 years. If we correct those bad laws, we'll attract that private capital back. That's what we're aiming to do. And I think you can see from his reaction the precise reason why we needed to step forward, because that vitriol would have been targeted at a particular company, and we want to make sure that we can get it to a point where we have private capital knowing that it's going to get built so that we can get it to the finish line. So we're prepared to take that forward to get to that point.
Okay, we only have a moment left, and I want to ask you about what you were saying yesterday in Montreal, because you called this a moment of reckoning for Canada's economy. You said the country is in grave danger and that Canadians need to support each other to survive as a country. That's pretty strong language. Why do you think that kind of language is warranted right now?
Well, because when you look at what we've seen for the last 10 years, where we've been printing money and going deeper and deeper and deeper into debt, every single government is in dire financial straits, including ours. We've got billion-dollar deficits also. You cannot be in a position where you're reliant on a single trade partner and the relationship becomes unreliable, and you don't look for new partners. You have to start looking for new markets. The only way that you can support and sustain government spending is that you've got to create the wealth before you spend it. And so we haven't been doing that for the past 10 years. And now we've got to, whether it's LNG export, whether it's new pipelines so we can do bitumen export, whether it's uranium development or copper and gold mine development or interties, those are the things that we're talking about now. And I think that's a good change of pace. So when I go abroad, I support all of my premiers and all of the various products that Canada produces. And I think that that's the spirit that Canadians want to see us working in, and I hope all of the premiers take that message.
All right, we'll leave it there. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, appreciate your time as always.
You bet, thank you.